Hi, this is Peter Godinez, your ambassador with K80Y TV, and this is another series of Meet the Candidate, and we have the privilege of having Jonathan Sharkey here, and so I'll call you John. Is that okay?
John is good. Yeah.
And this is always an opportunity, John, to get to know the real person behind the candidate. So let's start on the beginning. So where were you from? Where were you born? Can we just start off that easy?
I was basically born in Boston. I grew up south of Boston, Plymouth County, and then down on Cape Cod. That was 65 years ago now. So I was born in the first half of the 20th century, as I like to tell people. And when you grow up in the Boston areas, during the 60s especially, politics came in right behind the Red Sox and Bruins and just ahead of the Celtics.
Good answer.
So it was natural to be politically involved, and I brought that with me when I came to the West Coast and got involved in Fort Wayne.
Now, who raised you? Again, the typical type family?
Well, my dad was in industrial sales. He sold leather finishes to shoe factories. In Massachusetts, of course, the shoe business used to be huge, and I'm probably the only one in my family that never actually worked in the shoe business in one form or another, either in the factory or I had an uncle that was a union president. My dad was, of course, in industrial sales, different capacities. I had another uncle that was Southeast Massachusetts Republican Party chairman, but we sort of considered him the black sheep of the family, I guess. Although he did quite well for himself in the construction business.
Now, so did you have a mother too that somehow contributed to this?
Oh yeah. Well, it was a very traditional 1950s kind of household. With my mom. My parents were both children of the Depression, and from my mom actually is where I got a lot of my political values. If you look at the history of that family, my grandmother was a single mom raising 3 kids. She was working as a housekeeper, and Franklin Roosevelt and the WPA really saved their lives. My uncle was able to work with the Conservation Corps, and there was a little money coming in, there was food on the table, and so in our house, Franklin Roosevelt was a revered figure, and that carried through.
That's interesting. Did you have to share the spotlight in this household? Was it you the only child?
No, I was the only child, which explains a lot of things about me. My wife will certainly tell you that. She reminds me again and again.
We'll get to that part.
You're acting like an only child today, John.
We'll get to that part, because I always like to find out the significant other portion of it. So, first education. Talk about your furthest back memory of how you were educated.
Okay.
Can I ask you that?
Sure. I'm a product of the public school system all the way. Started in first grade in Whitman, Massachusetts, which is next to Brockton, the home of Rocky Marciano and Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And I went through public schools, Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, and graduated there in 1967, and then I went on to the University of Massachusetts. In Amherst. So it was right through from first grade to bachelor's degree. It was a public education.
Now, sounds like you were heavily involved in basketball. You mentioned Celtics. Talk to us. Any experience in basketball?
Well, my ethnicity is Lithuanian, and the Lithuanians are noted as being great basketball players. It's a national sport in Lithuania. And the only shortcoming I had as a basketball player was absolutely no talent for the game.
I thought you were going to say height, but I said you're a pretty tall guy. But
I was kind of the big guy that would kind of block out and stand under the hoop, and I was let's say immobile.
Okay. But you enjoyed the game, though.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And what did you major while you were at in university?
Well, interestingly enough, I started out as a philosophy major because I didn't know what else to do, and it sounded kind of cool. But that didn't last long, and I wound up as a communications major. Because I discovered that you could actually get credit for hanging out at the radio station.
That's always a cool thing, and that was always a happening thing. Bring donuts to the station,
right,
that type of thing.
And that was one of the earliest communications programs in the country at that point. We had a campus station that had started in the 50s, and we had a 2-camera TV studio that we used, and it was It was early in the days. Now, I mean, it's become a big a big major. My wife, Beverly Kelly, founded the communications department at Cal Lutheran University, and that's the biggest department on campus now. But when I was there, I'd say, I'm majoring in mass communications. And everyone would say, what's that? You know?
So you went into communications after that, and that was
Well,
you
you know, I
graduated?
graduated in 1971, and there was a recession going on.
Okay.
And I applied for jobs all over New England, and people said, "Gee, too bad you weren't here last year." You know, we were really hiring people then. So it was, you know, I came out into a very challenging environment, and I wound up driving a taxi in Hyannis. We used to take the maids to the Kennedy compound,
right?
Things like that. I can tell you a story about Joe Kennedy off the air, but young Joe. Yeah.
All right. It's an offline type one.
You know,
Go ahead.
that was, you know, in those days, as I said, it was kind of rough times. And I looked at, you know, we had, you know, the drivers there. We had, I think we had 3 master's degrees and 5 bachelor's degrees, and you know, we were all, you know, old college guys who couldn't get work anywhere else. So it was kind of an interesting environment.
Oh, I bet it was. What did you actually settle into during those, I'll call challenging, character developing time frames?
Well, you know, we got to the point of right in 1976.
Right.
You know, my dad's company had been bought out, and they laid off the whole sales force. If you were within, you know, 10 years of retirement, you get laid off. So he got laid off. You know, things weren't exactly booming for me either. And I was there for the 1976 primary. I was a precinct captain for Fred Harris, who came in the middle of the pack in Massachusetts. But I had an uncle that had moved out to Phoenix, and my folks said, "Well, shoot, nothing's happening here. Let's sell the house and go to Phoenix." So I had been to Phoenix, and it did not speak to me, shall we say?
Okay.
But I had a couple cousins that were in the music business, named Dick and Don Idrissi, who wrote a song called "Never My Love." You may have heard that.
You said you remember it.
And I said, "Well, shoot, you know, there's no point in being in Phoenix. You know, let's go on to California."
There you go.
So I went to California with the idea of, well, we'll give it a couple of years and see how it goes. And a couple of years went by, and it kind of went okay. And I said, well, we'll give it a couple more years and see how it goes. And you know, here we are, you know, 30 years later, and it's kind of gone okay. You know, if you go back to that young man in 1976 and said, you know, this is what's going to happen to you, would you take it? And I said, sure, of course. You know, I've had a really blessed life here.
Yeah, that's a bicentennial year. I remember that quite clearly.
The great ships were pulling into Boston Harbor when we were driving out in the U-Haul truck.
So that's what brought you to California. Now, your wife now, I've heard so many things from Bob Allen in terms of what a great partnership. How did that particular partnership romance begin, if I could ask?
Well, she is a columnist for the Ventura County Star, and also used to write for the LA Times as well. And she wrote a column one time that was talking about liberals and conservatives or something like that, and I thought I would drop her a line. This is the early days of email, the mid-90s.
There you go.
And I thought I would send her an epistle explaining, you know, what a liberal actually was and what that all meant.
Okay.
And you know, she said thank you very much. And at the time, you know, I didn't have my own computer even. I sent it from the office and signed off City of Port Hueneme. And she says, "Oh, what do you do for the City of Port Hueneme?" And I said, "Well, you know, I'm the mayor pro tem." And she says, and the next one I got back, I said, "Well, where's Port Hueneme?" Because she lived in Simi Valley and worked in South Road. So then we started corresponding, and somehow the subject of Lithuanian food came up. We took that as a sign from heaven, I guess. And you know, that was 16 years ago now, and we've been together ever since.
Well, this is always a fun question. If she were to ask you what was the most attractive thing about you that made you curious, what would she say? Give it your best try.
Well, all right.
We got to the good looks and the personality.
And all the other stuff that really counts that I'm talking about here. Let me take a drink.
Good. Everybody's got to do that.
She, well, when we met, she trooped me around to meet all her friends, and
Okay.
they had to sign off and bless me, and we had conversations, and she would ask me questions, and one of the questions was, "What do you think, a marriage is all about?" And I said, "Well, I really believe it's a partnership. That we should be helping each other succeed and be and live a full life." And that was the answer that none of her other boyfriends had ever given her.
So it was an answer. That is really neat. That's really neat. But just going back a little bit, what was your passion to get into the political arena? Just kind of jump around back a little bit.
Well, a young man like you may not remember the '60s. But
No, I remember '76, so thank you for the compliment. Bruce Jenner won the '76.
You're right, yeah.
Okay, so yes,
but,
I do remember the '60s.
there was so much going on, and if you even think of the culture of the time, the TV shows. I mean, George C. Scott had a TV show called East West, where he was working in a city councilman's office in New York City, and there was a feeling about John Kennedy got elected. And the first campaign I ever worked on was in 1976 when he was running, and my classmate's dad was running for Registrar of Deeds. So I said I've been working in campaigns since 1960. But there was this whole atmosphere that this was public service was a noble calling, and that you could really improve things, you can make things better, and the civil rights movement was happening, and then all the trauma with the Vietnam years and all of that, and I was certainly caught up in all of that. So it never occurred to me that I shouldn't be involved.
Right.
This is what you did. This is what you were supposed to do. This is how the country was supposed to work, how things were supposed to get better. So that was always there from the beginning. And more specifically in Port Hueneme, well, I had been working with a company in LA, so I was going back and forth. I wasn't, there's a whole argument about long commutes and their effect on social fabric. So that was certainly part of that. But then, things kind of, that work kind of wound down, and I had a little more time, and there were some issues going on in the city at the time. There was a thing called the view tax, which was basically if you had a view of the ocean, they put an extra tax on your house. This is that would be totally illegal today. It was illegal then. The judge actually threw it out, and then they wanted to put an RV park or a recreational vehicle park on the beach. Instead of having the beach park, they were going to fill it full of RVs, and the whole city was up in arms at that point. And I got involved with that, and at the time, I thought, well, okay, I'll be James Carville. I've got a background. I was a concert promoter. I have that whole promotion side down, that whole marketing thing down. I thought, we'll find a candidate and I'll run the campaign. And then people started saying, well, why don't you run? Why don't you run? And I said, okay, I'm supposed to be so smart. Why don't I run? So I did. And then I won. And, I don't know if you remember that Robert Redford movie, The Candidate, on election night, everybody, the crowd's around him and his managers over there says, what do we do now?
I remember that. That's a good
And
reference.
that's the total feeling. I spent 2 years running against City Hall, and I walk in the back door the first time and I stand there and say, what do I do now?
Well, that's a great segue to ask you, given an opportunity to serve another term, what would be, in a summary, what would you like to accomplish?
Well, I go. This is my 20th year, so this is kind of a reflective time for me. And Beverly says, "You're never going to do this again, are you?" And I said, "Probably not. I'm not at an age where probably it's time to do other things." But I look back on what was on my to-do list back then. Most of that is pretty done. Now there's still big stuff there. We have. In Port Hueneme, the Market Street area, which is where the downtown used to be. That was one of the reasons I ran for office in the mid-'90s, was because we had a redevelopment policy at that time that wasn't working at all. And so that's still on my list, and we've come very close to it at times. I was elected along with a man named Bob Turner, who's since passed on, and at his retirement, he grabbed me by the arm and he literally had tears in his eyes. He says, "John, you have to get Market Street done." So I would still like to do that. That's a big one. That depends on outside forces. I don't know if I can do that.
Okay.
But we've got what I've found over the years. Politics is basically developing relationships, and I've developed the contacts over the years to actually help us move things forward. You look at the issues with the sand on the beach and dealing with Congress. We actually had an assistant secretary of the Navy out here to look at it, and he's a man that he's certainly not a friend of mine, but I have met with him a number of times in Washington, so he knows who I am and I know who he is, and I was able to get him out here to discuss the situation. And that's the value of experience in politics, is that you develop these contacts, these relationships over time, so that you can actually start to get things done. And I will tell you, I have learned the value of patience, because things move very slowly. The late John Vasconcellos used to say, the right idea at the wrong time is the wrong idea. And, okay, maybe it didn't work today, but maybe next year or the year after that, maybe it'll happen. I think, I've gotten to a point where I have that perspective, I've got that experience, and we are moving into an interesting time in our city right now. We've come through these past few years, which have been tough for everybody. But we didn't have the disruptions that other cities had. Certainly we didn't file bankruptcy, we didn't have layoffs, we got through this pretty well, considering the economic disruption. Let's not forget, on top of that, piled up the loss of the redevelopment agencies, which was a big thing for our city. $800,000 just disappeared overnight. So we've gotten through the bad part. We're starting to build for the new, for the future right now. We've got a good management team in place. We've got a new city manager that came on this year who's just full of energy. We've got a very capable city council. And I think we're going to be doing some good things in the next few years.
I think that's incredible. I think your story is incredible. Thank you, John, for being a part of this program, and I hope lots of people watch it.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you very much.
Thank you, sir.
It's Peter Godinez, your ambassador, KADY TV. Until next time.